Yeah, we're going to start right now.
They're saying when they're talking for just most of the children with survivors, so would be
Okay, we're going to get started again. If you please take your seats. All right, while everyone's taking their seats, I just want to introduce our next presenters really quickly. We have Kristin Zipple-Shedd, who serves as an adjunct clinical professor and staff attorney in the Immigration Initiative of the Randall Sorrells Legal Clinic here at South Texas College of Law, where she runs the Human Trafficking and Asylum Centers. Before she joined STCL, Kristin opened the Houston office of the Young Center for Immigrant Children's Rights, which serves as child advocate, best interests, and a guardian ad litem for unaccompanied immigrant children. She previously worked at Catholic Charities Cabrini Center, where she supervised the Crime Victims Program as well as the no-fee refugee and asylee adjustments and family reunification cases. Quite a load, huh? Before she moved to Houston, Kristin served as a staff attorney at the Domestic Violence Legal Clinic in Chicago. She also taught as an adjunct professor in the legal writing program at Loyola Chicago School of Law. Kristin completed her JD and Master's in Social Work, cum laude, at Loyola University, where she was a fellow in the Civitas Child Law Program, and before graduate school served as a case manager at the Dorothy Day House, a shelter for women and children experiencing homelessness as a result of domestic violence in Syracuse, New York, and graduated undergrad with a BA in psychology from Wake Forest. So welcome, Kristin. And Guadalupe Fernandez, Guadalupe, joined Tahirih Center in 2015 as the children's legal advocate. She works with unaccompanied migrant children, ensuring that their legal and social services needs are met. Guadalupe comes to Tahirih, or went to Tahirih with a wealth of experience working with immigrant children, particularly from her time at Catholic Charities Houston as the lead legal caseworker for the Child Advocacy and Legal Services Program. While there, she conducted intakes, created outreach trainings, and provided legal case management assistance. She also worked with immigrant children in the Office of Refugee Resettlement Shelters before that. And she failed to say she's also a Georgetown University graduate, Oya Saxa. So, welcome, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandon, and thank you to CILA and Yasmin and Dahlia for organizing this training. I think it's pretty impressive. We can all agree that I think they've been fully staffed for about 2.5 months, and they're able to pull off the training that is this successful, this informative for all of us who are trying to work on behalf of kids. So thank you for including us in the presentation. I also want to say it's inspiring in many ways to see all of you here. I've learned from you, learned with you, and really kind of sitting in the audience, I've thought about all that you've taught me as it relates to the topic that we're presenting on today, and then as a practitioner of immigration law. So I hope that this will be a collaborative presentation. I think many of you here have a lot to offer. So hopefully we can all be engaged and sort of in this presentation with more knowledge about how to connect the kids who we're serving with social services. Finally, I want to say how excited we are to have Jose and his mom Dora here to share a little bit about their experiences. They're similar in some ways to some of the kids that we've had the privilege of representing, but they're really grateful that, that they're here and that Jose's willing to share some of his story with us, kind of with the goal of helping us be better equipped to help the other kids for whom we're serving. So today we're hoping in the next hour to talk about 3 main points as it relates to helping you incorporate kind of a social services perspective into your practice representing unaccompanied minors. First, we want to talk about who the kids are who we're representing. I think Dr. Zayas and Brandon and other speakers today have done an excellent job of giving us some of the perspective of the trauma that the kids have suffered and some of the different wide-ranging the kids have, but they certainly inform how we assess and identify and connect them with resources that they need to move forward, that they need so that they can continue with us in terms of, and help us meet the legal advocacy goals that we create with the kids, if that makes sense. And then finally, I kind of want to have a conversation about how best practices for making referrals. I think it will be hopefully a dialogue just as we continue to move forward in serving people. So who are the kids? We're lucky, as I said, to have Jose here. So just wondering first, Jose, if you would be willing to tell us just a little bit about yourself. And Yasmin is going to translate. Jose speaks some English.
Hola José, estamos felices de tenerte aquí con nosotros este día. Si puedes comenzar solo hablándonos un poquito de... Háblanos un poquito sobre ti, sobre tu vida.
Me llamo José Sánchez,
My name is José Sánchez.
soy en el grado 11,
I'm in 11th grade.
soy de El Salvador y me gusta jugar mucho fútbol.
I'm from El Salvador and I like very much to play americano or no? Soccer.
We're going to ask Jose more questions and a couple questions for his mom, Dora, also throughout the presentation.
Okay, so I want to start out with some statistics. The statistics are probably statistics we've seen before in any UAC CLE, the violence that the kids are fleeing, but that's going to inform a lot of what their other needs are going to be. So they all come with pre-migration trauma, right? Look at the statistic from Honduras, 65% of children migrated to escape from violence in their communities, including death threats from criminal groups, the continuous fighting between rival gangs, common crime, and intrafamilial violence. In Guatemala, 70% of children in Guatemala live in situations of violence. And in El Salvador, 22% of migrant children had to quit school because they did not feel safe. 10% became prisoners in their own homes, staying in day and night out of fear. So that in itself gives you a picture of what they've experienced, what are their fears, having to drop out of school, what is the loss there, right? Like psychologically and also educationally, developmentally, and that's going to inform a lot of the needs that the kids are going to have. This is some client art. One of my cutest clients made this cute little stamp reflecting on why she likes being in the U.S., right? Lo que me hace sentir bien es que hay seguridad en el país y respetan las leyes y no hay tanta violencia. And she drew a little school and kids playing soccer. And so these kids come here with childhood trauma. In Los Angeles, the school district's mental health director reviewed records for students entering one of these newcomer schools that they have there. 94% of those given mental health screenings reported at least 3 traumatic events in their lifetime. 65% had clinical symptoms in the range of PTSD and depression.
We know that many of you have experience with working with kids, unaccompanied minors who have trauma, but I'm curious kind of about the level of experience that we have. So how many people here, by show of hands, and then keep your hands up, have represented at least one unaccompanied minor in family court or in immigration proceedings? And how many, keep your hands up, how many have represented 5 unaccompanied minors? 10? 15? Anybody represented 50?
Over 100.
Over, yeah. No, so we have a lot of experience, and I think that when you think about the kids that you've represented, what sorts of trauma have they experienced in home country prior to them making it to the United States into your office? Does anybody? Domestic violence. What else? Gang violence.
Witnessing the murder of family members.
Witnessing violence, including murder of family member. Anybody else? Forced prostitution, human trafficking. So a lot of wide-ranging trauma. So there's a lot to think about, consider in using the interviewing techniques and to kind of understand who the kid is when they come. And so Jose has graciously agreed to share a little bit about what where he lived and about his life in El Salvador before he made his journey to the United States. So can you tell us about, Jose, can you tell us about your life in El Salvador before you came to the U.S.?
José, ¿puedes hablarles un poco de su vida, de tu vida en El Salvador antes de venirte para los Estados Unidos? Yes.
Cuando estaba en El Salvador tenía muchos problemas de enfermedad porque como los años limpio como es aquí.
So, when I was in El Salvador, I had a lot of health problems because it's not as clean as it is here.
Como tenían problemas como de dio dengue y es problema por los mosquitos.
Like, for example, one of the problems I had was dengue, which I got because of the mosquitoes.
Entonces tuve que ser ingresado en un hospital y mi mamá lo tenía sus internados y ella tenía que salir del país para poder darnos el tratamiento.
So I had to be hospitalized, and my mom had to leave the country because we didn't have enough money to pay for my treatment.
Eso como mi mamá no estaba aquí era muy diferente porque nos quedamos con mi tía y mi papá, pero mi papá se fue al año siguiente.
So it was really different because my mom wasn't with us, and so we had to stay with my father and with my aunt, and then my father left the following year.
Como quedaba con mi tía, nos teníamos que repartir los quehaceres y ella era muy diferente conmigo a la hora de hacer limpieza. Yo tenía que hacer más o pasar por eso con los amigos.
Okay, so it was very different, my life with my aunt, because we had to divide up chores, responsibilities, and she was very different than me when it came to cleaning. Oh, she also treated me differently when it came to the food.
Entonces, también mi mamá a veces cuando me daba dinero para ir a la escuela, que sea $2, mi tía no me daba todo el dinero que me daba 50 centavos o a veces no me daba.
She was also different with me when it came to the money that my mom sent for me to take care of me. She would send for me to at least be able to take with me to school $2, but sometimes my aunt wouldn't give me all of the money. She would just give me maybe 50 cents. ¿En algún momento tuviste problemas con las malas, con las pandillas?
Un día yendo a la escuela, estaba un carro, pasó porque mi casa está cerca de la escuela, solo me obligaron a subir al carro.
Yes, so one day when I was going to school, my house was close to the school, and a car passed by, and they forced me to get into the car.
Como ya sabían quién éramos, porque como estamos cerca de la escuela, nos dijeron que a mí me dijeron que tenía que desconectar dinero y renta, que si no uno no lo paga, pueden matar a uno.
So they knew who we were because we lived close to the school, and so they told me that we would have to pay rent, that we would have to collect money to pay them rent, and that if we didn't, that we would be killed.
Y antes, hace uno o 2 meses, a mi prima le robaron su teléfono y con una pistola, ya nos tenían vigilados, ya sabían quién éramos nosotros.
And a few months before, they had been watching my cousin, and they had stolen his phone at gunpoint, and so it was like they were watching us, and they knew who we were.
Thank you, Jose. So I think Jose was willing to share some of what he experienced in home country. I think it's unfortunately the reality of most of the kids that we see. There's a long history of different types of violence and trauma, including some of what you mentioned, that are really important in us gaining an understanding of what their needs might be, so that we can make appropriate referrals.
So we're going to talk about assessing the child client's needs. Here is some cool, I don't know if anyone took psychology in undergrad, but if you did, you remember the Maslow's triangle of needs. So this is a theory that talks about the different needs that each individual, but also child, has. So at the bottom, you have the basic needs, the physiological needs: food, warmth, rest. You have safety, security and safety, that's emotional safety, physical safety. There's also then the needs of belonging and love, intimate relationships, family, friends. There is esteem needs, and then self-actualization. And so the theory behind this is that if you don't meet your basic needs, you're not going to move on forward and focusing on the other higher needs. And so looking at what a lot of the children we work with have experienced, some of them basic needs, right? That was something that they were missing. Or here in the US, right? Now that they're here, maybe they're in situations of poverty and basic needs are what they're missing, or safety needs, right? And so your role as a legal advocate is, what am I doing here? Where does the legal case fit in? Well, you simply by advocating for their legal status, you're helping them meet their safety needs, right? I don't want to go back to that country because it was unsafe. I am scared to go back. So you, by helping them access safety, you're helping them meet those needs that eventually will help them move up, right? Or even think of the role of status. Legal status plays in accessing physiological needs, right? But public benefits, food. Going to a food bank, you need sometimes some sort of legal status to access medical care. You need some sort of legal status. So your role in helping them meet those needs. There's also needs that you might think you don't have a responsibility for. I'm just an attorney, I don't have time or resources to help them meet their needs. But that's what there's professionals for, right? Other referral sources, and that's what we're going to talk about, how to connect them to other resources.
I think even just in gaining an understanding of their needs or doing a culturally competent assessment of your client's wide-ranging needs, it's important to remember that hierarchy, because maybe they don't come to an appointment on time or miss a court date, hopefully not, but there's things that happen because of the trauma that the folks have experienced because of living in poverty. Last night we had a call to prepare for this presentation, and we weren't able to get through at the time that it happened, and it turns out that Dora, last night when we had the call,
Anoche cuando tuvimos la llamada,
can you tell us about the problem that made it difficult for us to speak at first?
¿nos puede hablar del problema que surgió que hizo difícil que pudiéramos hablar al principio?
Bueno, debido de lo que se me iban a meter a robar a la casa.
You mean due to the fact that they were going to rob my house?
So I just think, like, they were, what happened, I mean, that's not something that in my life, I mean, certainly everybody has to deal with kind of a consideration of maybe their house is going to be robbed, but I think statistically there are neighborhoods or apartment complexes where there's other incidents of that happen. So I think it's just mindful when you're assessing the client who comes to you and engaging the client, try to elicit information so you can make appropriate referrals and help them achieve their advocacy goals, to be aware of everything that might be going on in their life. When you do needs assessments or the client comes to you to Charlotte at Catholic Charities or to Walk In Wednesday at the YMCA, what sorts of assessments do you do apart from determining whether the kid might qualify for legal relief in your services? Does anybody do sort of basic needs assessments at the initial point of contact or during an intake? Do you mind sharing what that looks like in your?
I usually ask questions like whether or not they have air conditioning or heating, whether they have plumbing that's indoor or outdoor, if their water runs. Because a lot of people's plumbing use outdoor plumbing, like outhouses and stuff. Whether they have a vehicle or if they're able to take a bus to school. There's a lot of communities that are farther away from the cities or where they can't just walk to school. Those are some of the things that I have.
Those are great questions. Anyone else have ways that you sort of elicit to gain an understanding of your client's basic needs when they come to you asking for legal help?
When we had a social work student from the University of Houston Graduate School of Social Work, we appended a questionnaire, basic questionnaire onto our own intake questionnaire that addressed basic needs. And then if something got triggered in that was a greater need, then the social work student would see them and certainly tell us about what was going on.
So I think where it's possible to incorporate social work or social services into your practice or partner with an agency or at least get involved in a conversation with a social worker who could give you perspective on some basic needs that would certainly impact your client's ability to make it to your office, to share information, to help meet your legal advocacy goals, we need, I think, as a community to try to figure out how to incorporate that into our practice to help us do our jobs, to help our clients move forward from the trauma that they've suffered. I think as a community, I think there's certain agencies like Tahirih that do more written basic needs assessments because of the structure of the nonprofit that they have, but it would be, I think, best practices for all of us in one way or another to incorporate that.
And it's understandable, right? Each nonprofit or each attorney, we're limited on time and resources. And so a lot of the needs that come up or that you might become aware of are done through like the relationship that you're building with this child, right? Through the rapport building, maybe at the intake level or when you're drafting the declaration. They're going to say things that might be important to them, maybe for you irrelevant in the legal case, and you might just overlook it and move on. But to them, it's important, right? Like maybe during the declaration and they didn't show up and they say something about like transportation as a need, or my mom is sick in home country, right? And there's where you're going to start identifying those needs. But here is an important tool, right? It's important to be culturally competent to do this needs assessment. Every child is different, right? Yes, most of these children are fleeing violence, but each of them handle it a different way. And so what you want to look at is their history, their story. And you as an attorney working on their legal case, you're in a place of privilege. You're going to be listening to their life story. So things that help inform what their needs are, you're going to look at the history and experience of their immigration, their country of origin, the length of time that they were in home country or the length of time that they've been here in the U.S. Different needs come up, right? Their motivation for migration, right? I came to the U.S. to work, or I came to the U.S. because I had no other option. And certainly their legal status, that's going to shape their needs, right? The need of the child maybe when you first meet them, and then maybe different needs are going to come up as they get their SIJ, as they get the state predicate order, as they become residents. Maybe once they're citizens, their needs are going to change. Also, their experience of acculturation here in the U.S., that's going to influence a lot of the needs we're going to see. You know, you're adjusting to a new culture, you're learning a new language, you're at that time, a lot of these kids are first experiencing discrimination, an environment of discrimination, right, and oppression. Maybe they've experienced it in home country, but in different ways. And so that's also going to inform a lot of the needs. Also look at your family, the family that they're living with now or the family that they come from. What do they consider to be family? It's not going to be mom and pops, right? A lot of the kids are unaccompanied. Maybe they are living with mom and dad again, or they're living with a family friend, or they're on their own. Look at the cultural norms and values, their religion, their belief towards health and mental health services. That's going to inform a lot. For example, you try to refer a kid to mental health services and they reject it. I'm not a crazy person. I don't need that. Also look at the cultural values and beliefs regarding child development. Maybe when you're doing intakes and you ask a kid, tus papás te maltrataron, right? Did they ever mistreat you? And sort of that concept of mistreatment. Well, all of the kids got beat violently. They didn't see that as different. But here in the US, we're like, whoa, like that level of beating is like different, right? And so it's having these conversations and understanding what the child's individual experiences, perceptions of the world are. That's going to inform a lot of on the needs assessment. So I know we have already talked about trauma and child development, but I did want to touch on it again because that's going to inform a lot of the other needs, right? So here's the tree of life, again drawn by another client. You know, there's an interesting theory out there that, you know, each stage of child development is like a part of the tree. So at the roots, you have, you know, your infancy, your childhood. Maybe at the trunk, you're an adolescent adult, and then the leaves, you're like a full adult, older age. And if there's trauma at any stage, so if there's trauma in the roots or trauma in the trunk, that's going to affect the development and growth of the rest of the tree. And so we've talked about, you know, prolonged stress and the effects that that has on a person's health and well-being. So, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ACE scale, which is something that the dean was talking about. Again, you're not expected to do these questionnaires and these assessments on all your kids, right? You're an attorney, you know, there's people that are qualified to do that. But let's look at, I wanted to bring it up so you can look at the things that are on this scale and they're going to inform your work and are going to inform the needs that the child has. So, adverse childhood experiences include family dysfunction. That's going to help. That's going to be an important event or an important experience in your child's life. Physical, sexual, emotional abuse and neglect by parents or caregivers. Peer violence, witnessing community violence. So these are things that we've commonly seen in working with our kids. Also look at stressful life events, right? Here's another scale that talk about the things that influence the development of a child and are going to inform your needs, right? The death of a close family member, personal injury or illness, being in detention. Detention itself is a traumatizing experience. Changing in living conditions. Living in a new country in itself is a traumatizing experience. A new home, a new school. You also want to consider daily hassles and uplifts, right? For you as an attorney, the most important thing in this child's life is his immigration status. To the child, that might not be the case, right? That's the last thing they're worried about. What is this document? They don't understand the concepts of nation states and borders and statuses. To them, maybe the most important thing is, I'm going to get kicked out next week. What do I do? Or I'm pregnant. What do I do? So it's important.
So a couple more questions for Jose. Just kind of understanding. So there's pre-migration trauma. There's often the kids who are representing experience different stressors and trauma on their journey to the U.S. So now Jose has graciously agreed to talk a little bit about his trip to the United States. So I'm curious what you remember most about your journey to the United States, Jose?
Sí, hablando sobre tu viaje a los Estados Unidos, ¿qué es lo que te acuerdas, lo que más te acuerdas del viaje?
Cuando nos agarró migración y estuvimos en un cuarto donde íbamos pasando de la madrugada.
So when we were going across, it was at sunrise, and I remember I remember when immigration caught us when we were in a room.
Nos separaron la persona que nosotros veníamos, a mi hermana y a mí, nos interrogaron los zapatos porque no sabíamos qué era.
So they separated us. It was my sister, myself, and the person that was bringing us, and they interrogated us separately, and we didn't know what was going to happen.
No sabíamos si nos íbamos a volver a ver porque éramos niños y no sabíamos que nos íbamos.
So we didn't know if we were going to be able to see each other again because we were kids, and we didn't know what was going to happen. ¿Cuántos años tenía cuando te agarró inmigración? Y si te acuerdas, bueno, ¿cuántos años tenías?
Tenía como 12 años y nos llevaron a un lugar como para niños refugiados.
So I was 12 years old, and they took us to a place for refugee children. ¿Cómo te sentías en ese momento?
Nos separaron de mi hermana y era para sentir con amigas, o no me sentía tan bien como cuando la veía todos los días, o y no iba a ver a mi hermana y eso no era nada feliz de la vida.
It was hard. I wasn't happy. They separated me from my sister, and it was Christmas time, and I didn't know if we were going to be together, so I didn't feel good.
Estuvimos ahí como por un mes, era Navidad y era Año Nuevo también. No la pasé con mi mamá como pensé que le iba a pasar y tampoco con mi
So we were there for like a month, and so we were there for Christmas and for New Year's, and I didn't get to spend them with my mom like I had hoped, and then I also didn't get to spend them with my sister.
So when we're serving our children clients, right, we want to make sure we make this as client-centered as possible, right? We want to empower our clients. We're not just going to give them referrals and give them all their basic needs, but empower them to, they're survivors. They've been through more than we can imagine. We're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. There's more that we probably don't even know about or see. So we're empowering them, to move on with their lives. And so you want to recognize your power dynamics. He didn't understand what was going on when he got into ORR, when he was detained by immigration. He didn't think he would ever see his sibling again. It's children living in an adult world, adultism, right? It's children playing in this immigration system created by adults for adults. And so you want to recognize those power dynamics. Maybe this is the first time they're sitting in a fancy attorney's office, the first time talking to someone with a tie, and having to tell them the deepest, darkest stories of their experience. And so just recognizing those power dynamics, and I think Dr. Roche did a great job of being child-friendly in your interviewing. You want to provide options for services, right? So, I want to refer you to counseling. Counseling would be great. Would you rather have counseling with your family or just yourself? Would you want it to be in the school or in a separate office? Maybe there's shame in having other peers seeing you go to the separate office. Provide the child those options. And you want to involve the child in decision-making for both process, right? That's not just for your legal case, right? But also for whatever other services you're trying to connect them with. If they don't want counseling, fine. I encourage you to take counseling, but I don't want it. Or you're telling me you're going to be at risk of homelessness. Like, here, let me give you the emergency crisis shelter number and call it when you're ready, right? And so sometimes the kids don't want to take it, and you just got to understand, like, hey, it's up to the child. And you want to create a safe space. You want to have a sense of trust and security. Not judging, right, your child. Your child's getting into some sorts of trouble in school again. Remember, it's the trauma. Remember, it's the experience. Remember, it's development. And so making sure you continue that rapport and you create a safe space with your child.
Now, Jose, I want to ask you a couple of questions about what happened after you left the shelter. You were reunified with your mom. First, how long had it been since you'd seen your mom?
Yo quiero hacerte unas preguntas sobre qué pasó después de que saliste del centro, del albergue. Yo sé que fuiste reunificado con tu madre. ¿Hacía cuánto tiempo no la veías?
No lo veía como desde el 2007 y llegamos aquí como el 2012 a principios. Entonces eran como 5 años. Yo tenía 7 años.
Okay. So I hadn't seen her since 2007. We got here like at the beginning of 2012, so it had been about 5 years. I was 7 when I last seen her.
Cuando la vine me sentí feliz porque no la había visto en tanto tiempo, era mi mamá.
When I saw her, I felt very happy. Well, I hadn't seen her in so long, and it was my mom.
Y nos llevó a comer, nos ofreció todo lo que necesitábamos porque no teníamos nada todo el día.
I'm listening too much and not remembering to interpret, sorry. She took us to eat and she bought us everything that we needed. Clothes, everything that we needed.
Jose, do you remember the first time you went to immigration court? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
¿Te acuerdas, José, de la primera vez que fuiste a la corte de inmigración y nos puedes hablar un poquito sobre eso?
Fui con una amiga de mi mamá porque estábamos nerviosos que nos iban a hacer algo y nunca habíamos ido.
We went with a friend of my mother's because we were nervous that they were going to do something to us. We'd never gone before.
No sabemos qué hacer porque no estaba mi mamá ahí porque no es neta aquí, entonces pensamos que iba a hacer algo y no nos sentíamos tan conformes como estoy ahorita porque sabemos.
Okay, so we weren't sure what was going to happen. We weren't sure what to do because my mom wasn't with us because my mom's status is not legal, and so I didn't feel as certain as I feel right now sitting next to her.
Fue algo difícil, pero ya cuando ella estaba con nosotros y le hablamos con mi mamá, habló con Dalia y todo eso, ya me sentía más seguro porque sabía que si nos iba a ayudar.
Can you tell us about what you meant? So Dalia is Jose's attorney. If you can tell us a little bit about the first time that you met her, how you felt.
Okay, so que si nos puedes explicar un poco de la primera vez que conociste a Dalia y cómo te sentiste.
Me sentí un poco más seguro porque ella sabía cómo nos podía ayudar.
I felt more certain because I felt like she knew and she was someone that could help us.
Nosotros no sabemos nada y mucho menos siendo personas que no están asociadas
because we don't know anything about the laws here, but Dahlia knows about them, and we felt very certain that she was going to help us.
Did she help connect you with any agencies or organizations?
Ayudó a conectarlos con algunas otras organizaciones o agencias aquí.
Ella nos ayudó a conectar con CAE
She connected us with Kai.
y también fuimos al Centro de Mujeres por el problema de la violencia doméstica.
And we also went to the Center for Women because of the domestic violence problem that we had.
Estuvimos recibiendo clases aquí, aunque no eran un poco lejos.
We were attending classes there, even though it was a little bit far.
Sí nos ayudó también porque era como clases más para enseñar a mi mamá.
And those classes did help us because they were counseling classes for my mom, for myself, and for my sister.
Y ahora tenemos un psicólogo porque como es un poco lejos y tuvimos que hacer tareas.
And so now we actually have a psychologist because, well, the center is far and we have to do homework.
Do you have advice, like your attorney was able to help you? Do you have advice for us about how we can help other kids who are in your situation? Or might have been in this situation?
So, tu abogada ya pudo ayudarte a ti. ¿Tienes consejos para los abogados que están aquí, para todos nosotros, sobre cómo poder ayudar a otros jóvenes que están en unas situaciones parecidas?
Yo diría que como hay personas que vienen aquí y no tienen sus papás o son personas que están por sí mismos.
There are people that are here and they don't have their parents, they're here on their own account.
Entonces a lo mejor se le daría muy difícil ir a lugares muy lejos porque digamos no pueden manejar o a veces trabajan y tienen aquí para trabajar y mandar dinero allá.
So for them, it's hard to go to places that are far away, and maybe they have to work. They came here really to work and to send money back home.
Entonces, digamos que una buena donde tenga su local donde es cerca de personas que tal vez no pueden manejar.
So to be located close to people so that they don't have to drive so far.
I think that's a really win-win.
No en el centro.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think some of what Jose is talking about is so relevant and important in terms of us trying to connect our clients with the resources that they need to help them with their immigration case. If you need a mental health evaluation, if you need a counselor's letter, it's a little bit less feasible if they have to take 3 buses across town when there's a single parent who's working a lot, and the reality is just, I mean, I think it would be difficult for anybody to do sometimes some of what we ask our own clients to do. And so, it sounds like Dahlia was able to connect Jose with some resources in the community. I'm wondering if there's other people that you have found your child clients working with, or with whom you've connected them, who've been really instrumental in terms of helping your client move forward, or helping your client connect with resources. So who's helped your clients? Yeah.
Well, we've had clients like with disabilities, for example, and they have they need new wheelchairs. So sometimes we'll reach out. We're fortunate to be in a really large organization with a volunteer services branch. So we always reach out to Sister Pauline, and she was able to, within a matter of days, connect them to wheelchairs and just very basic things like that.
That's a great idea. Looking internally with your organization or organizations with whom your agency partners to meet the specific needs that you identify your clients as having. Who else has helped your clients? Yeah.
We were lucky and we had somebody from the YMCA who was connected with this young man. And so we can't drive anybody anywhere at University of Houston at the Immigration Clinic for liability purposes. She was able to drive him. Then we were going to truancy court. She got him to truancy court. Unfortunately, now he's aged out of the program because he's 18. And his attorney, we got him, we're filing for adjustment of status based on approved SIJ. So, of course, he got EAD and he wants to work, but he has no transportation to the Social Security office. So trying to figure out bus routes and, trying not to use the students' time to figure out bus routes and that sort of thing is difficult. I called Big Brother one time, and they said, no, they don't take that type of case or something. I forget what the reason was. I don't know if he was too old or something.
So partnering with agencies or organizations or volunteer groups even that provide the service that your client needs, not reinventing the wheel in terms of identifying what resources are available or how to help somebody navigate the bus routes. I think those are great suggestions. Who else? Who else has helped your clients?
Yeah, I've worked with neighborhood centers. I was in counseling for my client, she's like 19, 20. That counseling and also tax services. Some of them are interested in the tax.
So other nonprofits, organizations. Yeah.
Shout out to the Children's Center in Galveston. They help a lot of homeless kids.
Yeah. So different transitional living programs might be able to help your clients. Is there anybody, not somebody that you've referred your client to, like Legacy or Houston Area Women's Center or neighborhood centers, but is there anybody who's come to you as an advocate for your client, somebody who they connected with who actually ended up being really helpful for you to meet your advocacy goals and then also to help your client get connected with the social services that they need? Yeah.
We work predominantly with children, so the Young Center really helps us not just with different services if we don't have time to
Yeah. So a child advocate with the Young Center for Immigrant Children's Rights, I think that that's definitely a resource that some of the kids, even post-release, might come with somebody with whom they already have rapport and a relationship, somebody who has a little bit more time to help you explore, in some ways, how to meet the child's best interests. Yeah.
We've gotten phone calls from counselors. There was a principal who a couple weeks ago brought a kid to my office. Typically, they have to wait till they're 18. But a lot of times, like it's the school people, like when they identify someone, and we've had PTOs fundraise when money was needed for a kid's application. Sometimes the kid turns 18 and is homeless, and then the school officials send.
So definitely, that's a great idea. Schools, liaisons within the schools for students who are new arrivals, even parent-teacher organizations within the schools or communities. I think, like have had the privilege of working with kids who have had this type of trauma, and so sometimes when people who aren't as experienced and don't understand the stories of the kids like Jose and the other folks that we're working with, like when they hear, they might be able to step up in a way that we can't because of our boundaries and because of the reality of our caseload. So I think those are all wonderful suggestions, and I would encourage us all to kind of continue conversations about identifying, sort of like Dahlia talked about earlier in terms of identifying possible folks who could serve as expert witnesses. I think there really has to be brainstorming and reaching out and building relationships to identify social service providers or social workers who can help meet the wide-ranging needs of our clients.
So at the Tahirih Justice Center, we do a basic needs assessment for each of our clients. They meet with a social service associate in our organization, and we do a basic needs assessment. And again, not all organizations have the capacity to do this kind of work. But these are things that you might want to keep an eye out for and reach out to find there's resources for each of these things that you can connect with clients. So support systems, some like Jose said, right? Some of these kids are here on their own without any parents or without any adult that really cares about them. Sometimes you are that support system. You're the one person that did care, the one person that did listen to their story, and the one person that advocates for them, the one person that takes the time to call big brothers and big sisters and see if they can provide services. Food and clothing, basic needs that every human needs to live with dignity. Finances, obviously, it's something that the kids mentioned. Housing, a lot of these sponsorship relationships deteriorate after the honeymoon phase. Transportation, obviously legal services, not just immigration legal services. They might get in trouble here. They might need some sort of other legal advocacy. Substance abuse, unfortunately, due to trauma. A lot like what the dean said, some of them need connections with those resources. Health and mental health, safety planning. Maybe they need some sort of safety plan here. Maybe that someone here is studying them or doing harm, and so it's working with them, developing a safety plan. All children should know to call 911, right? Maybe no one told them ever to call 911 if there's an emergency, or maybe they're scared of the police here in the U.S., right? Let them know that if you're ever a victim of crime, feel free to call the police. They're here to protect you. It's not like in home country. And obviously education.
So we have about 7 minutes left, and I know that I want to dedicate a little bit of time in case people have questions for Jose and his mom about how we can do a better job of connecting folks and representing the kids who we're representing. So just in terms of making appropriate referrals, I think there's no best practices. It's about building relationships. It's about asking repeatedly. It's about, we also provide a service to social service providers. Like they are often encountering people who come to them with immigration issues. So there's ways that we can share our knowledge that helps them, and they can share their expertise and background that helps us. I think it's a fine balance, like everything is, between writing and phone calls and training and meetings and just building relationships, much like we do with our clients and experts.
So you guys have all mentioned great resources that people that actually do this for a living and can help connect your client with services, child advocates, post-release workers, school social workers. The schools have resources and have access to resources. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's communities in schools and community youth services here in Houston. And so right now we're working on a resource sheet. We're trying to do a statewide resource sheet. We have stuff for Houston and San Antonio and down in the Valley. But if anyone has any information on resources for Austin or El Paso or Dallas, and then once we get all that information uploaded, we want to give it to CILA, and CILA will post it.
So if you have those resources, send it to them, and we'll
add them to the resource sheet, or just give me your card, I'll give you mine. Best practices for making referrals, again, consent, right? Like, if your child does not want you to call a place, do not, right? Feel free to call and give non-identified information to find out about a resource. But, best practice, get some sort of written consent, allowing the child to tell you what they want disclosed or not to other referral sources. So I think they've already sort of talked about crisis and emergency. Just remember, we're all mandatory reporters here in Texas, any professional, and we have certain obligations that inhibit our communication and relationship with clients. We're limited by the law, by our professional ethics standards, right? We each have different purposes and roles, social services, legal social workers, attorneys, and we're bound by those. Whatever our agencies have in place for us, whatever our funding requirements are, these are barriers that we have to sometimes navigate or overcome. But remember, responding, always 911.
And I think that Yasmin in the next presentation is going to talk about boundaries a little bit, and so maybe, I just think that's an important thing for all of us to consider, but for purposes of time, we'll skip that part. Lupe mentioned the child abuse reporting requirement. How many people have had to make reports to the Department of Children and Family Services in Texas related to child abuse for one of the kids you're representing? How many of you felt a little bit reluctant about, or I don't know, it's a difficult thought process. It's a difficult conversation to have with your client, with your supervisor, with yourself. I think it is important because of our statutory, there's professionals, people who are licensed by the state. I read that to include attorneys, who work directly with children in their capacities, are required to make reports to the state when they suspect child abuse or neglect or have reason to suspect, and are required to report it within 48 hours. So I think that as you're trying to understand what the needs that your client has and how to make appropriate referrals, there is a fine line between getting too much information that might compel you to make a report, getting the information that you need to help your client. I just think it's a conversation that we need to keep having with each other, with our clients, so that we can move forward in ways that help us to help the kids be safe, benefit from the legal remedies that are available under our immigration laws.
And just having that honest communication with your child, right? Letting them know, what you tell me, yes, will be private unless I feel that you are in imminent danger. And if I feel that you disclose something that I feel that you're in imminent danger, then we're going to talk about it, you and I, and how we're going to move forward to make sure that you're safe. Communicating them the process of what a CPS investigation looks like and what's next.
So, Dora, do you mind if we ask you what advice you give us as attorneys trying to help kids who have come without their parents sometimes, how we can do a better job of helping the kids as their attorneys? It's a convoluted question.
Dora, ¿nos puede aconsejar a nosotros como abogados sobre cómo podemos mejor ayudar a los niños que vienen a veces sin sus padres a este país para hacer nuestro trabajo mejor?
Yo pienso que en casos de los niños que no tienen sus padres, pues si hay aquí, no estoy tan enterada, pero si hay alguna institución como para brindarles esa ayuda a ellos. Y siendo que son niños abusados, según el caso que sea, porque hay niños que son abusados hasta de su padre o familia o gente, creo que ellos merecen otra vida mejor. Pienso que...
So I think that in the case of the kids that are without their parents, that if there exists here, and I don't know if there does some sort of institution to help those kids, and especially in the case of kids that maybe have been suffered abuse and sometimes by their parents.
Los que son abusados, ya sea que de su padre o de familia o de gente, porque los niños realmente son que no se pueden defender, no pueden hacer nada en su defensa, y si hay padres que son pobres, de caso incluso, y lo que quieren es ver a sus hijos en otra posición, en otro lugar, lo que hacen es tratar de moverlo.
Yeah, so whether the kids have suffered abuse by parents or some other family member or really anyone, well, oftentimes there are parents that have few resources, and their goal really is to try to move their children out of that situation.
Last question is there anything that Jose's attorney, Dora, did that was helpful for you or for Jose in terms of understanding the immigration process or understanding resources that might be available for him in Houston?
Ahora, ¿hubo algo específico que hizo la abogada Dalia en ayudarles para entender bien el proceso de inmigración y también las agencias y la ayuda que existe aquí en Houston?
Sí. Dalia, o sea, ella fue quien me abrió las puertas.
Dalia was the person who opened the doors for me.
Porque realmente yo estaba lejos de todo lo que era respecto de inmigración o de leyes, porque siendo ilegal lo que yo temía era roce con la autoridad, con la ley, por lo que yo era ilegal.
So I was really far away from everything that is immigration, that is legal, because being someone undocumented, illegal, that's what I most feared, was any sort of brush with the law of immigration.
Cuando yo fui a la cita con Dalia, primero fui a Caridades Católica, me refirieron con CAES, que fue donde encontré al ángel, que es Dalia, y pues cuando ya hablé con ella y hablamos un poco de lo que estaba pasando y de lo que mis hijos estaban en orden de deportación, pues ella me orientó cómo también continuar y que íbamos a luchar el caso en las cortes.
So first I went to Catholic Charities, and then they referred me to KIND, and that's where I found, I don't know if I can say this, the angel that is Dalia. And that's where we spoke with her, and I told her what happened with my kids, and that they were under an order of deportation, removal proceedings. They were in removal proceedings. And she oriented us, she gave us an orientation.
Ella me orientó también como para que ellos recibieran con el psicólogo. Fui al centro de mujeres, pues con toda la orientación que ella me dio me pude divorciar también. Y fui al centro de mujeres, recibimos charlas, tuvimos con psicólogo, algo que nos ha ayudado muchísimo.
Okay, so she oriented us, and she told us how we were going to fight the case, and then she also helped me get a psychologist or therapist for the children, and she also oriented me so that I could get help from the Center for Women, and so that I could get my divorce.
I would just end by saying, let's go and open doors. In our capacity as attorneys, knowing that we need to take care of ourselves and maintain the boundaries that we're going to hear about, but we are in a position to help connect our clients with the services that they need. So let's go and do it. We might not all be angels, but we can help people connect with resources that are available. So, Jose and Dora, thank you so much for connecting with us.
Just a quick thank you to them, Jose y Dora, for estar aquí, for being here. But also, I cannot take all the credit because when I started working on their case, when I got to Fine in 2012, I wasn't able to go into state court, so I had to find somebody to help me with that part. And actually, Mary Rote is the attorney that handled that part, so she also gets a big thank you for helping on this case. Yeah, I think we have a little bit of time to take our second break. Are we on time? Yeah, so we're going to take about 10 minutes and be back. So be back in 10 minutes so we can do attorney self-care. Ethics credit. It's the ethics credit.